What is it that sets the Secrets of the Bees apart?
It's just amazing behaviour, amazing characters.
20,000 species around the world, and each of them have an incredible role to play.
What was our worst sting?
Bertie, that was bad.
Welcome, I'm Huw Cordey and I'm the showrunner of Secrets of the Bees, and this is Beyond the Lens. And today I'm joined by two key people from the team, producer-director Nadège Laici and researcher Tom Oldridge. We're going to be talking about story, shoots, surprises, and how we brought this project to life. We're going to start off with you, Nadège. So what was it about this subject that really attracted you to it?
To have 3 years to really delve into all the behaviours, into honeybee hive, etc., I thought that would be something I wouldn't be offered again, so I couldn't turn it down, really. How
did that amount of time really help in telling some of the stories we wanted to tell?
Yeah, so the particularity of Secrets of the Bees is that we focused on one species, the honeybee, and gave it a lot of airtime and also of our time. And then from there, we sort of visit the other species. And what it allowed us to do is put a lot of that budget onto the honeybees, and so to develop a way of filming them, kit to film them. We had some people in the team dedicated to filming the honeybees, and that allowed us to spend probably 6 months developing those filming techniques. And so by the time we actually started getting shots, it was a long time into the production.
And of course, it's a story of seasons. What they do at the beginning of the year is very different to what they do at the end. So we also had to tell that whole story that takes place over, let's say, between the end of winter and the beginning of autumn. Now, Tom, you spent many, many days working on the honeybee side of the story. It was quite an interesting setup where sometimes you felt like there was very little separating you from a swarm of honeybees. So illustrate the scene to our viewers.
The first thing that we kind of had to assess, which was really trying to work out how the bees were feeling that day. There was a real process of getting to know the hives. We had some hives that were particularly grumpy, some that were a little bit more friendly.
And did we give them names?
We did give them names. We'd name them by their queen. So we had Angelina.
We had Megan.
Yes.
We had Beyonce, didn't we?
Oh,
yes,
we had Beyonce.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they all had their own little personality.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't remember which ones are the grumpiest. I think it was Jane.
But yeah, there were some that we'd turn up and we'd know to avoid. Particularly if it was rainy that day or overcast, the bees could be a little bit grumpy. So we had to pick, we had to kind of be listening to the bees make a particular sound when they're happy or they're annoyed, and they also give off a kind of smell. So you're kind of paying attention to all of those things when you're walking up to the hive. We'd pick probably the happiest hive of the day. So the very first thing we did was kind of take off the roof of the hive. We learned how to take out the comb. We'd search for, if we wanted to get a particular shot of the queen, we'd have to look through all of the different combs and work out from these 60,000 bees which one of them was the queen. Pull out that comb, bring it inside. We placed it in a kind of a stage that we were able to remotely control, and we could kind of move around to let us do these exciting little camera moves.
One of Alistair's other inventions.
Yes,
yeah.
Mad genius Alistair McEwen. So yeah, we were able to do these kind of moves with this stage, and then we get all of our lights inside. We'd built, kind of like Nadège said, this kind of mini studio within the studio that would keep the kind of temperature and the humidity and all those kind of things the same, and that would just make sure that the bees were kind of as comfortable as possible and we could get natural behaviour.
And were the shots easily won?
I've never met such a moody animal. Sometimes you turn up and they would be so calm, so happy, like getting on with their own things, not paying us any attention. And then sometimes they'd be a bit in a mood. And I think it was weather, temperature, I don't know. Also, they're really sensitive to smell. So it could have been that if you were wearing perfume or something like that, and they would emit this pheromone that smells a little bit like banana. Although I never thought it really, anyway. But yeah, and then sometimes they would just like fly to the light or fly to us and start stinging us, and especially Alistair.
Yes.
And they wouldn't be happy, and then you'd be like, okay, we'll put them away and leave them a minute, or take another hive, basically, work with another hive.
So were you wearing bee suits at the time?
Yes, we would wear bee suits all the time. But then when they were very calm, you could sort of remove the hood because it was very difficult to film. As many of our camera, talent on the series would be able to say, it's super difficult to focus with a hood
a big
on.
black hood on.
They're not made for filming. I think that's one of the things that we need to think about if we make another bee film, is to adapt the suits to filming, because they are made for you to work like this, and so the visor, what is it? The visor thing kind of falls onto your face, and if you go like that, it kind of like hits your nose, right? Do you remember that? And so it's impossible to film with it. So we did have to take it off, and then some things would maybe happen sometimes, but overall, for the amount of bees we worked with, and for the amount of time we spend with them, I don't think we got that many stings.
No,
I was going to ask,
speaking.
actually, given that we were filming honeybees and other bees, some of whom did sting, for 2 years, how many people did get stung? What was our worst sting? Because I can think of a few.
Well, do you know what? I texted everyone that I could think of that has worked with the honeybees and the other bees. And I think it came up to about 100 in total, if we really round it up. So it's not that much when you think of the thousands and thousands of bees we've worked with. I think one of the worst ones, I think, happened in Japan, where the fixer actually got stung on her head by one of the, not bees actually, it was one of the
hornets.
Hornets. Yeah. So yeah, she got stung on her head, and that was pretty bad. But she was checked into hospital, and she was all fine. But the other worst ones were like our drone up, who was quite Alex Johnson, who was quite allergic, and his face literally ballooned, and then Bertie as well.
That's the one I remember.
Yeah, well, we had
the
two.
first morning of filming.
That
was a good start.
Yeah, that was pretty bad, and
I'm very unlucky as well, because Bertie was filming us when they're swarming, and actually, funny enough, as people will see from the film, when bees swarm, they're incredibly calm because they're not defending anything. They don't have a brood, they don't have any honey, so they're very calm. And Bertie was doing some filming right up close to this swarm, and you can see it in the film. And he's maybe just 12 inches away, and it was all going very, very well. But a bee flew onto his face, and as he blinked, he caught the leg of a bee between his eyelashes.
Very unlucky.
Very unlucky. And as he blinked, it squashed the bee a bit, and it stung him as a result. And so we had a very sort of swollen-faced Bertie. Looked as if he'd gone a few rounds with Lennox Lewis. Or that's a bit of an old boxing analogy. Who's the latest one? Anyway, Tyson Fury.
Exactly.
It looked like he'd gone a few rounds with Tyson Fury. And that was a bit unfortunate, because obviously it meant that we had to film him from only one side for the rest of that day. That was a bit frustrating, and that was very, very unlucky. But I think you're right, is that given how much we filmed, obviously we were very careful and very considerate. Tom, as you said, we were very aware of all the changes within the bee world and sort of listening to the signs. Anyway, moving away from the world of stinging, the Secret Strand is obviously well known for its unprecedented access to the world of its subjects. So what is it, do you think, that sets the Secrets of the Bees apart?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, I think it's the first time that we've done sort of more of a macro, animal, isn't it? We had the octopus, the whales, the elephants. So they're all like big, sexy animals. And well, I think the bees are as well, but they, they're not the obvious ones that you would go to, really. So I think in that way already it sets it apart. Then we've got less episodes, so it's a little bit quicker to sort of go through them rather than the others that were like about 3 episodes. And also I think with bees, there's so many more of them. So we were always wondering, how are we going to make characters out of them? That was my biggest worry when I started, is like, you open a hive and all you see is like, it's like, how are we going to pick out this one individual that's doing something? And that, obviously, that took time. We were watching them, and just, your eye just gets into it, really, and you start reading reading the comb and what they're doing. Oh, here's the queen as she's interacting with another bee. Oh, here's two bees doing trophallaxis, which is when they exchange the liquid and start feeding each other, basically.
All the other secrets have been on individual animals, which has been easier to characterize, whether it's penguins or octopus. The whole of the octopus three-parter was, certainly the opening episode was more or less about one octopus, one individual. And obviously it's incredibly difficult to do that with an animal that lives in a massive colony and is an insect, of that size. And as you said, Nadège, we had to work very, very hard to try to characterize not only the honeybees, but also the other species, which you did incredibly well, Tom, when you went to Australia to film Dawson's bees. Tell us something about that, because that, I think, was one of the standout sequences in the film.
Thank you. What can I say about that? I think we were really excited when we turned up because immediately we could tell that this was going to be a dramatic sequence. There was kind of drama unfolding absolutely everywhere. There's bees literally popping out of the ground, coming up from the ground. There's fights breaking out everywhere. It felt like there was a real story as soon as we turned up.
What you did, I thought, incredibly well was to try to characterize individual females coming out.
Exactly. I think we had to really put ourselves in the quote-unquote shoes of the female. Think, how would she be feeling at that moment? So it's about kind of getting on her eye level and really feeling like, imagining what it would feel like to have all these kind of males jumping on top of you as you're trying to emerge into the world for the very first time. And we also, I was working with a cameraman, John Brown, and we built this kind of, it's a piece of wood that we cut a hole out of and then we covered in kind of bits of sand that we'd found on the ground. We could place that above the entrance hole of the female and then place a kind of probe lens looking up through that as a kind of POV of the female. So we were able to get all these incredible shots of the kind of, as if you were a female and the males are kind of landing on top of you.
Yeah, very effective. Actually, it made the sequence those kind of POV shots, and they pop up all over the series. One of the other things, though, Nadège, is that I think makes Secrets of the Bees stand out, and is different to the other secrets, is the use of people, and having a sort of conservation story. These stories, they haven't been part of the previous sequence. So tell us a bit about using people and about trying to tell that conservation story and how important it was.
Yeah, so that's something I felt really strongly about when I started. We thought, and it turns out as well that we were right, that it would always feel a little bit claustrophobic to just be with the bees, especially with the honeybees inside the hive and other bees inside their nests. And so we were like, how do we take a breath of fresh air and actually come out a little bit and see them from our point of view a little bit, and having people in the film is brilliant because that allows us immediately to do that. And especially when you have people that really love bees or work with them and trying to protect them. And so in episode 2, you'll see that there's more of those kind of stories. There's like Ryan, the beekeeper, who's working, he's always worked with honeybees, right? He's had them for, I think his family worked with them for like 5 generations. So he's really used to bees, but now he's trying to change the way he's working with them. And then we've got these ladies, which is one of my favorite sequences, in Mexico, that have given up on actually keeping honeybees and gone back to keeping their local bees, the meliponas. I think what the people have done really is have shown us that there are, not only the honeybees, but there are loads of other species. And also it helps as well feel people hopefully empowered about what they can do to help bees. You don't need much. You literally need a square foot of ground and you can plant flowers. Any flowers and you'll help bees, apart from roses. But, even such a small amount in your garden or on your balcony, you can plant flowers and you'll help bees.
And I think we realised that it was an impossible story to tell without talking about the conservation aspects or without including people. And again, that's something that's very different with the other secrets, where you could tell this amazing story about groups of animals, whether it's whales or elephants. But I think with bees, because honeybees are effectively like a livestock, and they're fundamentally vital to humans. And as we say several times in the film, they provide every third mouthful of food because of their pollination.
Would you say that's like, could you tell me what is the most interesting thing you've learned over the course of the production?
I think one of the big surprises for me is, and I felt like I did have a fair knowledge about honeybees and bees generally, because I've interacted with quite a few around the world over the years. But what I perhaps didn't appreciate is that even though we'd like to encourage people to keep bees and support bees, just as you said, Nadège, with planting flowers, it's very important to understand that the honeybee, kept as livestock, is a very, very successful colonial species that outcompetes local bees. And so we can't have too many people with hives in any one location, because actually it has the opposite effect of what you want in terms of bee diversity. These honeybees are so successful at being able to find the nectar sources and then come back, as we might talk about later, communicating that information to the rest of the hive, that any nectar source has honeybees all over it before a local bee gets a chance. And so I think what I was most surprised about is the importance of understanding the whole picture, that it's not just about bees, it's not just about honeybees, it's about how we create a world where we're protecting the grand diversity of bees.
Absolutely.
What we can't say to our audience is, if you want to help bees, go out and set up a hive. That could be exactly the wrong thing to do. Before you set up a hive, you really have to know how many hives there are in your area. And there's a figure, isn't there? There's actually a sort of like an equation. How many hives per square kilometre? And it's really not that many.
Well, it's one. In the natural world,
exactly.
It's one.
It's maybe one or two. And that's why, you can't have mass production of honey, because you can't have loads and loads of hives in any one place. Because you have to think about it. In each hive, there could be 60,000 bees. And they need a lot of nectar to see them through the winter. So that's a lot of flowers. And, if the honeybees are all over every single flower that's coming out, there's not much left for the local bees.
No, absolutely. Particularly in the context of what's kind of been happening in big cities over the past 10, 15 years, which is that a lot of businesses have kind of been told to keep hives on top of their rooftops to kind of encourage, to kind of save the bees. But actually, like Huw says, we've kind of realised it's much more nuanced than that. And actually, you need to pay attention to the whole picture in terms of how much forage is available for those bees, and then how many bees are there in certain areas.
Now, Tom, you saw that firsthand because you were very much part of that sequence that we did in London with Bertie, and you went to those rooftops, which was amazing, and it's fantastic to see flowers and bees on rooftops, but that really came home to you then, didn't it?
Absolutely. It was amazing being, as high as you could possibly be in London, really, and kind of looking around and realising, oh my goodness, there's barely any forage kind of around for these bees, but I know that I can see hives there, I can see hives there, and just realising that actually we've kind of created a bit of a crisis, really. And
also, it's not good for the honeybees themselves, because they're struggling finding enough food to keep their colonies going. So, it's quite a lesson, isn't it? That we all learned that it's not just about, setting up a hive and thinking you're doing something good for nature. In terms of the honeybees, what was the sort of, a big science breakthrough that we actually featured? Let's say, for example, in the Queen's story.
Do you want to answer?
I can answer if you like. Yeah. I think that there are one of the things we really discovered paying so much attention to the science surrounding honeybees is just how many secrets there are, how many things we couldn't actually physically see. I think one of the most interesting things we kind of discovered was the fact that honeybees have this kind of secret language that if you place microphones that pick up vibrations on the kind of comb, you're able to pick up on. So we have a whole kind of sequence in the film around the kind of tooting and the quacking that queens do that kind of signal that they're due to come out and kind of display their dominance to the rest of the hive. Things like that, I think, unless we were collaborating with scientists, we just would never have known about.
Yeah, that's a very good example. And in terms of surprises, obviously, much of the two episodes feature honeybees, and they are the running narrative. But what was the most surprising thing that you learned both of you, about the wild bees?
So I think the most obvious thing that comes to mind is the vulture bee, which is a bee that I went to Ecuador to go film. It's found in the kind of rainforests of Usuni National Park. And it's a bee that is required to feed on meat. So they actually scavenge around the rainforest looking for bits of carrion. And then the amazing thing is that they will actually turn that into honey.
Exactly.
You wouldn't have that on your toast.
On the subject of honey made out of meat, how did it taste? Did you get a chance to...
I was not brave enough to try it, but I've heard that it tastes quite nice. It's got a bit of a smoky flavour to it, apparently.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And it is extraordinary because they're not just sort of flying around randomly looking for dead animals. They actually have this unbelievable sense of smell, don't they? They can actually smell a dead animal from a mile away. But there was another one we filmed in Ecuador too, Nadège.
Yeah, the fire bee. That's one of the things that surprised me the most, is that bees actually farm or like tend to livestock. So they've got these tree hoppers.
Yep.
I always forget. So yeah, so they have these kind of like tree hoppers that they find, the families of tree hoppers on the trees. And our sequence was literally filmed, wasn't it? Like over like 10 centimeters, there's like a little branch.
It was ridiculous. I mean, we spent a day looking for literally a portion of branch that's about this big, and that's where all of the drama took place. And without it, we wouldn't have had anything.
How did you find it then? How did you find a stick in a rainforest?
So we had an expert with us called Javier, and he knows exactly where on the kind of tree it tends to be and what kind of trees they tend to do it on. So it was just a case of really combing through the rainforest looking for those little patches.
Amazing. How long did it take?
I think it took Javier about three or 4 days, searching all day to find that tiny little. Yeah.
But then once you found it, was that sort of like the certainty for the following day and the day after that?
Well, we had to be really careful because they can move. So we really had to be careful when we were putting lights in, when we were moving lenses, really not to disturb them because, like I say, if they move, that's it. It's game over.
I remember you texting me, we haven't found them yet.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't found them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly one day it's like, yay,
We've
got them.
A real relief.
What was the most challenging shot that we achieved on this series?
I think for me, the most challenging shot maybe was the shot of the broomstick bee flying with its broomstick and kind of with the camera following it. I think that was a shot that I'd written down as a kind of dream shot and never imagined that we get it. We were working with a scientist to kind of work out what the kind of routes they would take would be, what patterns they were doing. And once we'd established that, then we knew they'll go from this point to this point, and we just had to be really on it, ready with the camera so that we could chase them and kind of get that tracking shot.
So going from the sort of challenging shots to get, we love every sequence in the film, don't we?
Yeah.
But which is our favourite?
Okay, let's start with you. What is your favourite?
Well, I think it probably is the hornets and Asian honeybees because I just love that sequence, the way it plays out. You never know where it's going to go. And by the end, you just cannot believe that these hornets that look like something that's been conceived by Pixar. I mean, they're ridiculous looking, these huge orange hornets, the largest hornets in the world, whose sting, incidentally, can put you in hospital, as we nearly found out during the filming, are basically overpowered by these tiny little Asian honeybees. And to see what they do inside their own hive as the hornet enters is quite something. It's extraordinary, the power of numbers. I mean, it's difficult not to be impressed. But what about you, Nadège?
It's hard. I mean, I've got two. Am I allowed two?
Can be none left for me. No, go for it. God.
Okay, there's two. Like, if I went for one that I didn't direct myself, the Dawson's bees, like, it's just amazing behaviour, amazing characters. I wish I'd been there. It's one of those things where you watch it and you're like, damn, I wish I'd done it. It was just so good. And it was super easy to edit. Like, it came in, we went into the edit with it, and within like, I don't know, 3 days, Matt Meach had one of our wonderful editors had a cut together. It was one of those that was like super, super easy. So that's one of my favorites. The other one is, obviously I'm really biased, but the Meliponas, I thought they were just such characterful bees. So they were so easy to film. You know, we got there and we could see the sentinel poking out of the hole, and we were like, right, we figured it out. It's our character. It's fine. And then these lovely ladies that have got so much love for the bees. I mean, out of all the people we've met on this series that absolutely love bees, you know, these ladies were, you know, they just have so much love for the bees. So that was really, you know, close to my heart. And also, it's my favorite species because you can just put your hand in the hive and they'll just crawl on you and they'll do their lovely little buzz. And I thought they were the most wonderful bees. After having worked with honeybees and how quickly they'll sting you, working with melliponas was just amazing. What about you, Tom?
I think one of my favourite kind of sequences was the almond pollination sequence that was kind of threaded throughout.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that we really managed to convey just how unnatural it kind of feels and how kind of difficult it is for the bees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of those shots of the kind of almond groves really do get across just how vast it is. There is literally nothing there. There's no wildlife, there's no noise. All you can see for miles and miles is almonds. And I think we really managed to get across just how crazy this whole situation is.
Mm. Yeah, I remember actually looking. You were there. You went and did the shots once the petals had, you know, the flowers had really like started flowering, so to speak. But I was there like 10 days before when they hadn't yet, and we were just trying trial drone shots. And I remember looking at the screen, and just like I found it completely overwhelming. For like watching it miles and miles and miles of trees with like nothing else. And it was the first time that I thought, oh my God, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. Well, not the first time, but like it's one of those times when you think, what are we doing to our world?
Yep.
It's mad.
It's dystopian almost when
Very
you see.
much.
I think I know what you mean, Tom. Because on the one hand, you've got these beautiful images of the almond trees in blossom. I mean, it does look absolutely stunning. And on the other hand, you've got just millions upon millions of bees all piled up, you know, in a sort of bare field, you know, ready to pollinate them. And so the two, it's kind of like a conflict, isn't it, between the beauty and the beast,
starkness,
as it were, and the
yeah.
starkness of it. You know, we're all proud of this two-parter. You know, it was a labour of love, but also we're very pleased with what we got, and we obviously hope it goes down well with the audience. But what is it that you would like our audience to leave with?
I think two things which we've discussed a little bit. I think first is just this understanding that bees are so much more than honeybees. There are 20,000 species around the world, and each of them have an incredible role to play. So I think understanding that is really important. And then two, I think, like Nadège discussed, caring for bees is maybe easier than people understand. It's about creating habitat and forage, and anyone can do that. It doesn't matter how little space you have, you can kind of create something that will help the bees.
Perfect.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, really.
Neither could I.
It's really, and also like in some countries you can keep bees, but you don't have to keep honeybees. You can keep your local bees. In the US, you can keep mason bees. And then in the southern countries, you can keep like all sorts of native bees that some of them produce honey.
And I think it's important to say that a lot of bees are under threat from habitat loss and pesticides. And, you know, it's with something sort of so small, they can go under the radar and be lost before people know it. So I think what I feel is that this two-parter is an opportunity to raise the profile of bees generally and to understand how important they are, not just to provide us with honey or pollinate our crops, but they're vitally important to all ecosystems, whether as we're pollinating the plants in that ecosystem or providing food for other animals. You know, they're sort of like the fundamental sort of layer in so many habitats. And I think it's important, you know, if people left understanding just quite how important they are. That's not a bad thing, is it?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So I just want to say a big thanks to Nadège and to Tom and you, the viewer, for watching this, and to say that both episodes can now be viewed on Disney+. It's streaming right now, and we hope you enjoy the series.